Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. The Bet with the Best podcast is sponsored by Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Speed, power, and ease of use are at the core of Amwager, designed to give players the information and tools they need to quickly make anything from a simple win bet to a complex, structured superfecta or pick 5 wager. When you combine that with data and pool updates that are up to 60 times faster than the competition, Amwager is the clear winner in wagering on races online. Those are just a few of the many special features that Amwager has to offer, along with live video and race replays, free, integrated form-to-win past performance information, conditional wagering, and true odds, which are a prediction of off odds based on all available pool data. That and much more. Amwager is licensed and operated in the U.S., and best of all, they will actually pay you to play. If you sign up now and deposit and bet $150, you will earn a $150 lump sum bonus. So there is no reason not to give Amwager a try. If you want to bet with the best, then you need the best tools to wager with. You need Amwager. Welcome to episode 21 of the Bet with the Best podcast. In this special episode, we're going to vary from our normal format to focus on two main themes. The first is developing a more systematic approach to handicapping, and the second is using a fair odds line to help translate your handicapping opinion into good bets. Joining me this week will be Fairgrounds racing analyst and notes writer Kevin Kilroy to provide some examples using some races from this Saturday's card at the Fairgrounds. So welcome, Kevin. How's it going?
Chris, it's going great. Thanks for thinking of me for this. I've listened to all the Bet with the Best, and in no way do I fit into that same upper echelon. So I know this is a whole different sort of piece and a new way you're approaching it. I'm excited to be a part of it. I appreciate all the work that you've done and getting those voices out there. And I've been learning from each and every one of them.
Well, great. And this is your chance to add to the library, which is what I'm trying to do, create a library of kind of evergreen content that players can use to help improve, especially those that are getting started or are kind of in a rut and want to see what they can do to move forward. And don't underestimate yourself. I chose you for a reason because, one of these themes that I'm going to talk about, the first one, developing a more systematic approach to handicapping, I think you have a good systematic approach. In a little bit, I'm going to let you describe what that is to the listeners. And I think that's a really important part of becoming a better player is establishing a process, establishing a baseline, a systematic way that you approach every race, every time, and that systematic approach is comprehensive, that makes sure you look at all the horses in the race and evaluate them. If you do that and you establish that kind of baseline, that gives you a way to evaluate your performance over time, and using that feedback, make changes to your process so you can get better. If you don't have that baseline, then you really have no way of systematically improving things. I mean, it just tends to be random. If you're using one method one day and another method next day, you don't really have that chance of improving. So I think that systematic approach is really important. And then the second part about using a fair odds line, you do kind of identify what you call a value line. It's not quite the same as a fair odds line. We're going to talk about that. But what I want to get people to understand is even if you do a great job of handicapping, you need to then translate that into a bet.
And that's not necessarily a straightforward thing to do. And I think one great tool for doing that is creating a fair odds line. That gives you a basis for figuring out, all right, given, if you can create that fair odds line based on your handicapping opinion, that is the best way to identify value, especially in the win pool, but even in the other pools. And so I want to talk a little bit about what a fair odds line is and how you'd use it. And we're going to do that. We're going to take your handicapping opinion. We're going to go through on a few races and actually create a fair odds line that we'll then use to talk about how to bet the race based on that. And I'm not going to talk about how to create the fair odds line. I'm actually going to be doing that in the background, using a little tool that uses some math and computer to take your subjective opinion and create an odds line. I'm just going to leave a teaser out there that I'm working with some other people to try to create a tool that does this for people, so you can create a fair odds line without having to do any math or have any computer skills. Just having a good handicapping opinion is all you will need to create one. But that's something for the future. But for now, just assume that I'll be in the background creating that, but it's all based on what you're telling me about the race. And that's the important part. It's just a reflection of your handicapping opinion. And we're going to talk about how to use that to make bets and keeping what I call the golden rule of betting. And that is making sure that every bet you make reflects your handicapping opinion of the race. If your opinion is this horse is an underlay and a bad favorite, then you should never be betting it to win. If you think this horse, the ceiling on this horse is to hit the trifecta, you should never be using that horse in the 2 spot or to win. You shouldn't be boxing it in tries or boxing it in exactas. It should only be in that 3 hole. So just that golden rule that your handicapping opinion always reflects, that your bets always reflect your handicapping opinion. That'll lead you to much more efficient betting. And we'll talk about that more with some specific examples. But to get us started, why don't you, Kevin, talk us through kind of what your handicapping approach is and talk a little bit about the product that you put out on the Fairgrounds website on the days where you do analysis for their races, kind of, how that reflects that systematic approach that you use to handicap a race.
Yeah, definitely. So what this is the first year I've tried to give, more than just, sort of a top pick or 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing that we typically see with public handicappers, and something that Joe Kristevec and I have been talking about. And I know he's pushing that conversation through on Twitter too. So I've been doing something that I call my playbook, and it's basically just a way of the way you're speaking of it being systematic, right? And having the sort of same way of approaching not only your handicapping, but then how how you take that handicapping opinion and put it into the market. So by sort of spelling it all out, my opinions to as much detail as I can see, where I should attack, right? I can see where I might be able to, find the races that really make sense to do multi-race wagers, find the races that make sense with exotics, etc. And the way you're talking about fair odds, I think it is that missing component to what I have. Or if I have that in my playbook as well, I'm looking at this and I can just sort of kind of stay true to it and look at it as that same sort of way. Like this is what I have to work with this card, and I want to execute it accordingly. So what I do is I've got columns. I've got top pick, right? Who I think is the most likely winner, but also with the way that I'm seeing it, right? Not just in terms of most likely to be bet hard, right? Not most likely to be the favorite, not most likely to win every time, but most likely to win this race on this day. And then I've got my win contenders, right? I come up with the horses who I think could also have a good shot of winning, and definitely can be finished first, right? Not just get a piece and that sort of thing. Then I come up with a column that's in the money contenders, ones that to run, second through fourth, the ones that, I don't usually play I'm blanking on the that I ever play at the top five, right? I don't play that one, but then I have tosses, right? That's a key column. The horses that I just think won't run at anything, and then long shots, win potential, and favorites I'm against. So I have these columns, and what I'm trying to do is see, if I've got a horse that I love, like race 1 on Saturday, Aztec Empress, I just top pick. I've got one horse that I think can win. I've got nobody in the winning contenders. So I'm seeing that as a single, right? I'm also seeing that as possibly, a key, on top for an exotic, for a vertical exotic. But then I'm also trying to see where, not only where the vulnerable favorites are. Like the first 5 races, I've got 2 vulnerable favorites, and I've got none. I've got one in the second 5, right? So maybe it'd be more, behoove me more to play that early pick 5, right? Because I might be cleaning some more value off by fading those favorites. So I'm going into all those details. Then I'm also trying to think in terms of, all right, these in the money contenders, are they going to get up a piece for a third? Are they closers on that fairgrounds track when speed hasn't been holding well? So I really don't want them on top at all. And I'm trying to identify, and you're kind of pushing me in this way in the conversations that we've had to really just identify, all right, third's the best they're going to run, second's the best they're going to run, fourth's the best they're going to run, etc. With my value line, what I try to do is just try to think in terms of, all right, what's the price that I would actually be interested in putting a win bet behind this horse? Because the morning line odds, they help guide you. But I think with most tracks you just see a lot of variation, and sometimes you might think you're getting value, and you look up and your horse is fairgrounds specifically, you look up and you see your horse is the odds-on favorite. When the tote board lights up. So trying to have that line there so I know when to push in on a win bet, because I think a win bet's key to my arsenal. When I have a horse that I like and I'm getting value for it, I definitely want to make that win bet every time. So that's basically what the way I go about it, and then all the handicapping underneath it. It all sort of begins with trying to get sort of a sense of what the par is just from looking at the horses in the race, the speed par, the speed figure, or the form figure, right? I look at Thoroughgraph, I look at Timeform US, I look at Brisnet, I look at buyers as well. I've got access to all that stuff, so I've got it all. I lean on Thoroughgraph specifically, and immediately sort of cut out the horses that just haven't run to those top numbers, those numbers that I think the best horses, the fastest horses in the race are going to run. And then, I look at pace and see how that is going to compromise things one way or the other. And then I start digging into the real, sort of the dirty work of it all, is why a horse sort of maybe will run better than we've seen in the past, right? Why might that improve? Bad trips, all that sort of stuff. I watch replays. Spend lots of hours doing that. So I'm always looking for reasons for them to step forward, whether it be a form cycle reason, a trip angle, etc. So that's all underneath, and that sort of informs how I slot these horses into these categories.
And you put that out there, and your value line typically is what you would consider to be a playable price for your top pick, right? That's the way it shows up currently. Yeah. So
it's not a full price, and I think fair odds is something that I don't I haven't spent much time thinking about. So how do you think through? How do you go to define the difference between fair odds and value line? How do you talk about that?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's hold off on the fair odds line.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. Since you asked the question, let's start. Let's go into it. No, that's all right. Let's do it. So let's talk about fair odds line, because some people might not have any idea what we're talking about. So a fair odds line really represents what you think is the break-even price on a horse. So like if you think a horse should be at 3-to-1 odds, if you were to bet on that horse, you had an opportunity to make that bet or similar bet 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, you'd basically break even at the 3-to-1 price. That's what you're saying. This horse is 3-to-1. At 3-to-1, it's a break-even bet. It's not worth making the bet because I'm not going to make a long-term profit, but it's not an underlay or overlay. That's your fair value price or fair odds on that horse. Of course, the way you use that, if it's 3-to-1 fair odds, then if the price, your anticipated price is higher than that, then there's the potential to make a long-term profit. And if it's lower than that, and those are what we call the overlays. And then if it's lower than that, then you would lose money long time making, over the long run, making that bet. So those are what we call the underlays. And so what you're trying to do with that fair odds line is identify, especially, simplest thing in the win pool, can I bet this horse to win with an anticipating making a long-term profit? And notice that the fair odds, you can find value, places where you have a price at post time or anticipated price at post time that's higher than your fair odds line. It may or may not be your most likely winner. I mean, the win bet may be your second or third or fourth most likely winner, based on your opinion of the race. So, and that is often the case. Typically, most likely winners are favorites, and favorites don't typically offer any real significant value. They can. You can find a short price favorite that for some reason you think is just even though it's a favorite, the public's underestimating, its likelihood of winning, and it would be, show up as being a value play based on your fair odds. That can happen. But at least in my experience, that doesn't happen that often. Typically, the value plays are getting beyond that favorite. And, without a fair odds line, if you haven't assessed what the fair odds are for each horse in the race, it's really hard to identify those kinds of horses, especially if you're just focused on what you think is the most likely winner. All the fair odds line is going to tell you is whether or not that's a win bet, but it doesn't tell you, well, if it's not, is there some other win bet in this race based on my opinion of the race? So, that's why having a comprehensive, systematic approach that evaluates every horse and creates a fair odds line for the field is so valuable, is that you can make those decisions, and be flexible about what you're going to bet. You don't want to, fall in love with a horse. You want to fall in love with a bet. And in order to fall in love with a bet, you have to understand what you think a fair price is versus the price that you're getting. So that's kind of what we're talking about.
That's so huge. I mean, coming into the sport, definitely, into gambling, it's all about, it's always all about that top pick, right? And who I like to win, who do you like in here, right? Who do you got in this race, all that sort of stuff. And I've been working hard to get away from that. And I do find, when I get back into my, public handicapper role, while I'm at fairgrounds, it almost like a lot of the work that I do to try to counter that kind of goes out the window sometimes, because here I am, with my top pick. This is the one that I get judged on. This is the one that we keep stats on, et cetera. And I'm sort of talking about it in that way. So it becomes difficult, because I don't think that's, the best way to approach it in terms of figuring out how to bet, betting the race versus just betting the horse, and betting the market, thinking in terms of markets, right? And thinking in terms of, all those biases that we do sort of build up when we do fall in love with a horse, when we do sort of attach our identity with the horse, like, oh, this is my pick, the horse that I doped out, this is the one. It just isn't, it doesn't create for systematic or logical or, effective betting for sure. So, I've been doing the value line on that top pick that I have, just to sort of like push, people who are checking out my picks, in that direction, to be thinking along those terms. And the more that we can do along those lines as public handicappers, because a lot of times, we're the ones that people who are just getting into the sport maybe listen to, or maybe tune into, or just at least sort of, check out the picks and that sort of stuff. The more that we can do that, kind of countering that and finding new ways to offer up our opinions, the better. So I'm excited for that. And, I wish I did a better job of coming up with a value line or a fair odds line. I think I kind of think of it in the same way, and you can keep on sort of talking to me, in terms of how maybe I'm not seeing it there. But yeah, I'm trying to think in terms of what I think the horse, what's their likelihood that they're gonna win this race, and that in terms of a price, right? The probability, and the odds that they're offering me. And if it's more than that, then I think it's a good bet, and for me that translates into a profit over a year, right? A long-term sort of profit scenario. But maybe there's some more subtleties there that you can help guide me through. But the more I can have value lines for those, those, even the tosses, right? Even the horses that I don't think have a chance, will help me to will help everybody think through how to attack and how to build a bet.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about the problem with making a fair odds line is if you're not a kind of a math person and you don't think that way, it's hard to do. But if you have a system, what we're going to do today is you're going to give me your opinion of every horse, and then I'm going to behind the scenes use a little math and computer wizardry to create a fair odds line based on your subjective opinion. And so you don't have to do all that math. And then, I'm not going to talk about how I do that, but I am going to, like I mentioned, I'm working with some others on a tool that hopefully we can make available to players where they can create fair odds lines without having to do any math. And that's kind of where I want to get, because I think it's such an important tool for really identifying value. So we're actually going to do that. We're going to walk through a race or multiple races, and each race you're going to tell me your opinion of each horse, and then I'll create the fair odds line using your opinion, and then we'll talk about what that means in terms of betting. That's kind of what we're going to do, and hopefully people will see the value. I mean, it really is kind of just a totally different way of thinking about it. Once you do start thinking that way, it's really easy and natural, but most people don't think that way, and they really are focused on winners, and they would never dream of betting any horse other than who they think is the pick or the most likely winner. Sometimes they'll only bet it if they get what they think is a good price, but many people will play the horse regardless of price. So that's the kind of thinking I want to try, at least for people who seriously want to try to make money long term, or at least improve their results over the long run. You need to get out of that kind of picks mindset and really more into the betting mindset and what's a good bet rather than what's the pick. And so we're going to try to show the value of that and show how we can someone like you with a sharp opinion and a process for evaluating the horses, we can take that and turn it into an odds line. It's not that hard if you got the right tool. And then with that, you can talk about making some good bets based on your opinion and following the golden rule of making sure all the bets match your opinion of the races. So that's rule number one. Make sure every bet you place is consistent with your handicapping opinion. If you're violating that rule, then you might as well not have an opinion because you're not using it. Now, if your opinion's no good, none of this will help. But if you use a systematic approach and including, creating a fair odds line and betting using that, and you track your performance, you'll know pretty quickly that your opinion is not very good, right? Because if you're making bets that are match your opinion and you're only betting into what you think is value and you're losing terribly over a long period of time, that tells you that your opinion is not very good. But if you don't do that, you'll never know how good your opinion is. You may think it's great and it's lousy, or you may not think it's that good and it's you're better than you think. But until you have a baseline that you can evaluate your performance on, and you're making are consistent with your handicapping opinion and you're only betting where you have, where you think you have an edge, it's even tracking your performance doesn't tell you much. So let's get started.
I'm seeing value as we talk. Race 3, 2 minutes to post at Fairgrounds. I like this 10 little GT. Has been in some tough pace scenarios, forward runners, much softer pace today. 6-1 was what I was hoping to get. We're looking at 10-1. So I'll keep us up to date on that. I put a little bet in there while you were talking.
All right. And that probably wasn't your most likely winner in that race, right?
No, Optimus Cat is, and that's the even money horse, and I'm not going to touch it. Optimus Cat is even money, yeah.
So that's a great example where you had more than just a price for your most likely winner, fair price. You had a fair price in mind for another win contender. And it turns out that's where the value is, which again isn't unusual. Typically, the favorites don't offer a lot of value, and that's just a great example. If you had a price for every horse, you can quickly make that evaluation and identify where the value is. And it may or may not be your most likely winner. It may even be your third or fourth most likely winner, but you think that horse is still a win contender, and the price is greater than what you think it should be. So that's exactly the mindset we want to try to create with every player, is, identifying value, trying to find that edge and bet into that edge. And so let's get started. Let's pick a race to get started on.
Race, you want to start with, what are we talking about? How about race 9, the Menard?
All right, let's start with that one. Let's walk through, you can walk us through that race. And give me your opinion on each of the horses, and we'll turn that into an odds line and then talk about how to bet it. So let's roll with the race 9. This is Saturday, race 9 at the Fairgrounds, the Nelson Menard Memorial Stakes. It's 5.5 furlongs on the turf for fillies and mares, and we'll see what Kevin thinks about this race. What's his opinion?
All right, so this is a 5.5 furlong turf sprint. And we've got 9 fillies and mares in here. The horse that I like the most in here is the number 5, Ouvre, Chris Block, 5-year-old mare, 14-time winner. Has been going long the past 3, has been going a mile or 6.5 at Kentucky Downs, and a mile at Keeneland, and proven that she can get the distance. But she swept the turf sprint series at Fairgrounds last year. She's just an all-out, honest, fast, tactical filly, and there's not too much speed signed on. I think Karimba will be the front runner. It depends on how the number 1 Going Good breaks, which has been a problem for that Cox mare. So Ouvre, I think, can sit right off of that front runner and get first run by and hold off everybody. Now there's a little bit of a wild card with Ouvre's that last 3 races she's been bolting. Right around the 8th pole, she'll just bolt out. And Chris Block's trying to figure out how to correct that, and he's making a little bit of equipment adjustments he was telling me about yesterday. And Loveberry, he's well aware of it. So we'll see sort of what's going on there in the mind of that filly that's making her bolt for seemingly no reason. But she seems like she's the one that I love in here. If the price is too short, obviously I like her a lot less. Karimba is my second pick in here. And she, coming out for Ray Hernandez, she ran huge at Churchill Downs on September 24th. One of those big races that makes you wonder, all right, is she going to be able to get back to that form level, or is she going to be kind of just sort of, trying but never getting there, but being bet like she could run back to that number. So she ran great in the Panzeretta, but it wasn't too tough of a field. And, the second place horse Going Good had another tough time out of the gates, but still was able to run well towards the end. So Karimba, proved that she didn't need the lead. She was able to press, and she was able to take over pretty early in the turn and pull away. I think she could be interesting, though. She could, I don't know if she'll offer much value, but she might just be the lone speed, the commanding speed at this 5.5 furlong distance. She had a great work on December 29th. She seems like she's doing good. But I'm just not sure if she'll be able to get to the number that she has in the past. And I'm not sure if she necessarily needs to beat these, especially with that pace setup. So I think she's extra dangerous in there, not only because of her form, but because of the pace in here.
So let me ask a question. So let me ask you a question between those two. Do you think, Ovra is more likely to win, significantly more likely to win than Karimba, or are they about the same?
More likely to win.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you really do have kind of the one at the top, and then Karimba's the other contender, but not quite at the same level.
Yeah, I would say significantly more if it wasn't for the pace setups, because the pace seems like it plays in Karimba's hand. It could just allow her to be bold and just dig in while she's trying to be passed there in the stretch. So
okay. So now I'm still not sure. So is it just a little bit better? I mean, are they about the same, or is there really a difference between their two in terms of likelihood of winning? A significant difference. Kind of sounds like you're hedging a little bit. Are they about the same, or is Ovra better?
More likely. More likely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. All right.
The 5.
That's good.
But
all
not.
Right. I just want to make sure. All right. Okay. Great.
If that means
So. No, that's good. I just want to make sure that you think one's a little, a notch above the other, and they're not about the same. So it sounds like you do. You're leaning. You got a lean, not a super strong one, but you're a lean on the 5 over the 3. That's great.
Yeah. My horse did not win it. Was in a good spot, but couldn't finish the deal. Kind of the same race that he's been running. So damn. Okay. So
come on, focus here, Kevin. We got to focus on the ninth. On tomorrow's ninth.
Okay. Yeah, just as a periphery, just saw that. But Poppy Flower, there's two horses in here that I think are going to get bet, because people are like, all right, why are they shipping in? Bill Moxon and Poppy Flower in, and then Peter Urton is sending this Brandon, my lawyer, and of the two, I like Poppy Flower more. But is a closer, and Ben Curtis, the jockey, just suits her really well. He's a patient rider, and he really gets horses to produce their big run in that European way. Just really a nice, gets them to show their turn of foot. But she's been running well. When she won the Grade 3, I think she had a little bit of a nice go with the rails were down, and she was on the rail, through the turn. She did tip out and move pretty well to get by Bubble Rock, but I'm not too impressed by Bubble Rock. She ran, decent 4th to Roses for Deborah, but that was a short field. She's been facing some tough sprinters, Dance Macabre and some other ones. I think she likes this 5.5 furlong distance, but I think she just might not have the pace setup that she needs to win. So I think she'll be an underlay in here. But I do think that she'll get a piece. And then Brandon's my lawyer.
So you have the ceiling for her. Her ceiling would be second then?
Yeah. Her ceiling I have as second. I think she could get second in there. And then the number 2,
but she's not a strong win contender though. She's really her ceiling is second.
Yeah. And this is something that I do though. When I'm handicapping, I'm also thinking about the price, right? I'm thinking about, I think she's going to be an underlay, and I of course she has a chance of winning, right? But I don't want to put any money behind her winning, if that makes sense.
And I think what we want to do though is we don't want to conflate those two things. We want to do a good assessment of their chances of winning, so we can create a good fair odds line, and then we let the fair odds line and the price tell us where the value is. So we want this to be an assessment of you don't want to conflate. This is step 1. We're trying to understand what should the fair odds be on this horse, and that is what that's based on its likelihood of winning. So whether or not it's value or not, we're not worried about that right now. We're just trying to assess the likelihood of winning, and then price will tell us if it's a value or not. So,
Right.
do you think this horse is a win contender? On the level of Karimba?
Yeah.
You do?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're not necessarily that you're going to bet it, but as a win contender, this horse is kind of, just like you think Karimba is a win contender, Poppy Flower is a win contender. All right, great. Okay. So that's the way we want to think about it. It's not, don't conflate the value piece because that comes later. Right now, we're just trying to say assess how, what's the likelihood of this horse winning so we can figure out if it's going to be a value play or not.
Yeah, that's huge because that is something that's just all mixed up in my thinking as I'm handicapping, right? I'm trying to get ahead of all that and try to think of how they're going to get bet as I'm making my opinion about whether I think they can win, and that that can be definitely a conflation, confusion.
Yeah, because and I'll tell you what, one of the reasons, first of all, to make a good fair odds line, you have to really assess every horse's chances of winning, just independent of its price. But, what happens with that thinking too is, you're fading Poppy Flower because you think it's not going to be value, even though you think it's a win contender. Well, what if the horse goes off at 8-1,
Right.
All of a sudden, so you don't want your fair odds line to say it doesn't have a chance when you really thought it did have a chance. It was a contender. You just figured it was not going to be a bettable contender. So, we're trying to separate those two things out. That's the whole idea of the fair odds line is it gives you that transition. It enables you to transition from picking winners to making good bets. That's where the fair odds line, that's right in between those two things that helps you transition from one to the next. But you still need to have a good handicapping opinion, understand who's going to win, who you think is going to win. And then, that you still want to do that independent of what the price is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go on too big of a tangent, but it's just that's really good to hear and this is really good to talk about because I'm always trying to notice my biases. I feel like they creep in on us whether we like it or not, right? And I'm trying to identify my own, and even if as soon as I just like, all right, I'm trying to beat Poppy Flower because I think that she'll be overbet, and I think people are going to get all over this Bill Mott horse just because it's a Bill Mott horse and coming from New York as opposed to facing this Illinois bred and this Indiana bred, Umbre and Karimba. And then, I just might not ever get back to really looking at her seriously at the windows again because of that, right? Because the way I sort of slot it and put it in my playbook and that sort of stuff. And that's not good. So this is super helpful to think through.
And also, if you underestimate that horse by conflating the price with the likelihood of winning, then you're likely to overestimate the horses you like, their chances of winning. You want to factor it all. If that horse is a win contender, if it's another win contender in this race, that's going to, lower the chances of the other contenders winning, and your odds line is going to reflect that. See, which you want it to do. You want it to be kind of your honest opinion of their chances of winning. And then, we think about value after we've established kind of what the fair odds are.
Okay. All right. So here's some more win contenders then that I was maybe thinking more in terms of second and third. Number one, Going Good, doesn't win very often. Just one win out of the last 14, but is honest, always trying, always finishing in the money. I think we've got 8 of the last 10 in the money. And just has some sort of gait issues over the past couple. Has the rail here. James Graham, we see the riders are just switching on Going Good all the time. So this will be the second time in a row that Graham will be up. And he's a nifty rider. He definitely, especially on the turf course, he's always thinking he's a heady rider. So if the break goes well, Going Good could trip out from this rail spot and could have sort of that perfect stalking position and have enough horse. And of course, coming from Brad Cox's barn, always dangerous. Less likely, very less likely, I think, than the other. Not very less likely, but less likely than the other three. But Going Good could win. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
But it sounds like maybe there's a chance it wins, but you're thinking this is more of a underneath horse, like a second and third versus the win.
Yeah, but definitely could win. I think.
But you say, all right. So let's talk about the contenders you've had. You kind of got the 5 of Raw on the top, got Karimba and Poppy Flower at that next level, and you're saying Going Good's a win contender, but even a level below those two. Is that how you're looking at it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's keep going. Let's get through.
Who can get second? Number 2, Brandon's My Lawyer. Hasn't raced since that day before that Breeders' Cup, since that Breeders' Cup Friday. Been racing a bunch on that downhill course at Santa Anita and some 5 furlongs at Del Mar, and just really hasn't hit in Thoroughgraph. I think just 7th is what we're seeing. Would need a big step forward. In that same way, sometimes you just want to stay away from horses in their next start after the Breeders' Cup. I think I'm kind of leaning in that direction with Brandon's My Lawyer. Ship it in here. Why? Maybe just to get the distance. Maybe to get doesn't have a stakes win, so maybe they're thinking it's going to be softer here at Fairgrounds, and really this is not a soft turf sprint at all. So I don't think it's maybe the field they were hoping for. So Brandon's My Lawyer, I think, could run well. It definitely is game through the wire every time I've watched. Every race that I've watched back of hers. But I think it's just a little bit of a notch below those other 3.
So he's more of an underneath then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And the only other one that I think can get a piece would be the 7, Ready Find from Michelle Lovell. Had a perfect trip last time, soft and just was there and kind of one pace, really didn't produce any late kick, but third start in the form cycle, and Michelle's barn has just really heated up recently. Doncho and just Mike got the win, and she had sultry last recently, and seems like maybe her barn's swinging back up, and I want to be ahead of that. So I think it would probably be a pretty good price on Ready Find. Still pretty lightly raced. Honest always shows up and does seem to be able to get a piece wherever she does show up. So I would say 3rd would be the best that we can get, but Ready Find is interesting underneath. So
between Ready Find, is that how you pronounce it? It's not redefined, it's Ready Find. Is that how they say it?
Yeah, you know what? Dooley and I were talking about it, and we agreed Ready Find, since it's more than ready and it's spelled REDI.
All right.
Fine. Yeah.
Okay, so is Ready Find at the same level as Brandon's My Lawyer, or a notch below?
Notch below.
Okay. All right, and then the rest are tosses, right? 4 Stella Noir, 6 Sweet Temperament, and 9 Breeze Easy. All those are tosses.
Tosses, thank God.
All right, you wouldn't use them on any of your tickets. All right, so I think we've got through the whole race, and so now we've got an odds line, and people can't see that right now who are listening. Like I said, I will tweet out this fair odds line, but basically it identifies 2 horses that where at least the morning line is higher than what based on your opinion and my machinations say your fair odds line would be. And that's one is your most likely winner, Au revoir. Your fair odds line, or the fair odds line, our joint fair odds line, let's call it, is 2-1 on that horse. And the morning line is 7-2 or 3.5 to 1. So there's some good value there. If we think that morning line is going to hold up, then that could be a win bet for you.
Yeah,
do you think that morning line will hold up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the one thing that she has going for is her trouble with bolting recently, and that could dissuade I think that's maybe too narrative for a lot of, the bettors, the big bettors out there, not her figures are great. Her form's strong. She's, I think she'll be less than that morning line. And 2-1 is what I had written down. It's just my gut instinct as a value line for me. You got to be higher than that, that or higher.
So it's interesting though, just to point out what, our fair odds line and the price that you had in mind for this horse came out, in this case at least, to be the same. Which is kind of interesting. So, I'll volunteer one thing about the lugging out. I think this horse is really a sprinter. I think she's just getting tired in these route races. That's why she's lugging out. I think cutting back to a sprint, she's much less likely to do that. So that's just my own. That's the only.
And talking to Block, he was saying he thinks that she's best going further. So we'll see. But that's what I was thinking too. Is just she's just she's better. She's just getting tired or something's going. When she's going too far, and maybe in the end she can get the distance right, and she tries all the way through. But something else. These little mechanical difficulties or something happens right as she's just going further than she wants to. So. Yeah, I think the sprint's gonna hit her right between the eyes.
So do you think, though, what do you think her off odds are going to be? And what we're going to do tomorrow is I'm going to actually look at the will pays and calculate an estimated off odds based on the will pays, which will be better than the morning line and better than our guess. But for now, do you think you're going to get that 7-2? If not, what do you think that off odds will be on the 5 in this race?
It's going to be interesting with those two shippers. See how much the market really kind of goes for them, and sort of what steam they kind of come with that I'm not privy to. I would think, assuming that those the Mott horse gets bet pretty hard in here, which I think she will. I'd say 5-2 would be my guess, be my morning line odd on Uber.
All right, and so there you're getting a little bit of value. And here I want to talk a little bit about this because, when do you pull the trigger on a bet? If you got a fair odds line of 2-1, and you think the price is going to be 7-2, well, that's pretty obvious. That's a bet. But now, if you think the price is more likely to be 5-2, and let's say we look at the will pays tomorrow and the horse is going to be 5-2, is that a win bet? And in theory, you're getting some value there, and long term you should make a profit. But the thing you have to keep in mind is there's some errors involved, and one of the error bars you have to put around is just at your fair odds line. It's not perfect. You're going to be off, sometimes high, sometimes low. So it's 2-1 plus or minus something. There's always some error in your fair odds line. Plus, your estimate of the off odds is going to be, even the 5-2 estimate based on the will pays could be off. You may get a bigger late odds change one way or the other than you expect. So, you've got error in your ability to estimate the off odds. You got error in your ability to estimate your fair odds line. And so my rule of thumb to people would be, you want, for lower price horses, a couple clicks above your fair odds line to pull the trigger. If it's a bigger price, it's more like a 25. I'll just say like a 25% cushion. So like on this horse, 2-1, one click of the odds board's 5-2. 2 clicks is 3-1. And when I say clicks, the old-fashioned odds board where you don't have decimal values, you just got the old tote board totalizer machine out on the infield. So for me, 3-1 would be pull the trigger. 5-2 would be some value. Maybe it's a horse I want to think about keying in some other bets where maybe if I can combine it with another horse where there's some value, I'm getting value. But as a win bet, I usually look for that, a couple of clicks or 25% edge before you pull the trigger. So for me, using your odds line, I'll look at the will pays and I would say, okay, if I'm going to get 3-1 or better, then I think it might be worth playing this horse to win. Anything less, probably not. Does that sort of make sense? And how do you do anything similar? I'm just curious how you approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's one thing why I stay away from short odds horses a lot, is because not only just thinking that it's a big wager to not get much back on, which is just sort of isn't what appeals to me about the gamble, but also keeping an eye on the way the late money comes, right? That can drop you below pretty quick. So I'm also watching sort of when the money's coming in on a horse. Is it coming in early, and is it kind of drifting up throughout? If so, then if we started off at 4-5 and then all of a sudden we're at 5-2, I'm thinking, all right, maybe we'll sort of I don't know, we might probably drop down just another notch. But if it's sort of continually approaching that, if it's kind of coming in just slowly being fed in, I'm thinking maybe they're going to keep on feeding it down up until their point that they want to hit it, right? Which might be whatever it is.
But the advantage of using the will pays for the doubles is those are locked in. There's no variation. Once that prior race is over, all the money that's going to be bet in that pool is in. So you're gonna know what your estimated off odds. It may be quite a bit different than what currently on the tote, but kind of the assumption is it's going to be more accurate, and that way it will kind of tell you where you're likely to see a late odds drop. If the double will pay, say this horse is going to go off at 5-2 and it's 7, 4-1 on the tote right now, even a few minutes before post, then you're probably going to see that late odds drop. Now, it may not always happen, and it may not always come down to exactly what's on the double will pays, but those are probably a better estimate, or I'm almost sure they're a better estimate than what's on the win tote and what was on the morning line. So that's kind of that you kind of don't have to be, you might still, if you're smart and you follow this kind of stuff, it sounds like you do, you might know certain early or bet late, and you can factor that in. So you might say, I know that this horse is this in the doubles pool, it's this in the win pool, but I know these guys tend to bet into the win pool, and then it's probably going to be lower than that double price. So you can always adjust even the double will pays based on your expert knowledge of how certain horses get bet. And if you're like the computer modelers like a Tony Zhou or Dennis Matoro or Keith Bush, they even have more sophisticated models that factor in everything, all the stuff, and try to estimate those off odds. But usually the double will pays are not, they're pretty easy to get, and they're fairly accurate. They're not perfect, but they're an improvement over just following the win tote, a live win tote, or using the morning line. And so that's kind of, I think, your best bet if you make a fair odds line is just to kind of use those will pays to figure out what you're going to bet, and just kind of ignore the win pool unless there's something just really crazy in there. But you kind of just assume that those will change, the differences between that double will pays and the win pool are going to get corrected, and probably corrected pretty severely if there's a big gap, right at the end, like you see a lot of times. You see that quite a bit, especially with the lower priced horses. If they're the favorites 6-5 in the doubles and it's 2-1 in the, or 5-2 in the live tote, you can pretty much bet that there's going to be a pretty big drop at the very end, in that horse's price. Not always, but typically. And it may not always come down to what the double will pay says. Sometimes it may overshoot it. I've seen that happen. So, but anyway, the bottom line is, I think your best bet is to use the double will pays, or, pick 3 to estimate what the off odds are going to be. And again, that takes some math. And again, I'll do the math for us. And it's not that hard to create some tools to help players know what those are. In fact, if you use DRF Formulator, you can get that estimate of the off odds based on the double will pays right in the DRF Formulator tool. There are some ADWs that provide that, and there are even some tracks now that are starting to show that information, on their live feed. So, and I think over time that it's going to get better. So I think you'll be able to get that kind of information without having to do any math. If you can't do it now, you'll be able to do it soon. And if you use some of the tools like I described, you already have that information. So let's assume.
When I look at this race, I see my opinions about this race. I think I'm probably not going to bet this race, because they seem that they're going to be in line with the public, right? When I think I'm in line with the public, I'm not seeing an edge, right? So, right. But then as you're saying, you can't bake that in before you get there. We got to see the market and see how it's taking shape. What do you think?
So let's just say for right now,
they're off 28.5 to 1. I mean, that'd be an interesting price, right? That'd be a very interesting price.
So how do that? Well, first,
with these other odds in here, and when what do you think in terms of firing, win bets and Dutching and stuff like that?
Let's talk about it in a second. I just want to just to sum up on the 5-horse. Your fair odds are 2 to 1. You're not anticipating that you're probably going to have a price that you want to bet to win, but at least what your fair odds are, and if you're surprised by the tote, you could act on that. So that's kind of where you're not anticipating a bet there because you think the morning line is probably too high, but we'll wait and see. Maybe it isn't. The other horse, just based on your opinion and my calculations, that offers some slight value, probably not enough to win for sure, but I mean, just where your fair odds are lower than the off price is actually the 8-horse Poppy Flower that we talked about. And I think that's another one where you anticipate the price to be lower than the 9 to 2 morning line. Is that fair to say? I mean, you've already said that you think they're going to bet the Mott horse down below that.
Yeah, definitely.
So even your fair odds line right now is just slightly under 4 to 1 at 3.9. So, it's saying 9 to, again, that one click of the odds board is not enough to bet. You need a couple clicks, but you anticipate, if anything, that horse is going to be a lower price, not a higher price. So you've got sort of your two, based on the morning line, you got two potential plays, but you're kind of anticipating that morning line might be off. So now the question is there any other win contenders where you maybe that those odds are gonna float up? And you only had one other. Well, you had a couple. You had Karimba, and he's an under. You're not anticipating him to be above the 3 to 1, or what do you think that morning line is about right for him?
I think coming from Ray Hernandez, bettors are quite familiar with him and the trainer, the connections. I think that Karimba's going to be interesting to see how they bet Karimba. I think she could go either way. I think she could get bet very hard, or I think they could sleep on her, and I don't. That doesn't change. I think she definitely got a good shot to be competitive and possibly win this race.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the odds line, and there really isn't anything close to an edge for anybody. So this looks like a race where basically, especially with your anticipation of, maybe it's the morning line being off on the couple of horses, that the public's going to get it right? And that's going to happen a lot. The public's going to get it right. And typically the smaller the field and the less competitive is, the more likely the public's going to get it right. And that public includes lots of sharp money, right? Including the teams. So you're not always going to find a race where you've got value. And that's, again, where the fair odds line really helps. It tells you this is a race where, you're probably not going to get a bet. Now, you did the work, and maybe you'll be surprised at the prices on these horses. So you can always act on that if it happens. But going into tomorrow, this isn't a place where you're licking your chops to make a bet right now.
No, it's not. And that's the worst part when you do the work and you're like, all right, here we go.
And that's a good point. Pool selection is really important. And there's sort of two things to factor into that, our race selection. One is, what are the kinds of races that your opinions are the sharpest? So, do you like maiden races or turf races or sprint races or route races or races at certain tracks? So that's one. And probably, try to, so you don't waste a lot of time, try to spend time on the races that you think are fit your strengths. And the other is typically the bigger the field and the more competitive the field, the more likely you're going to be able to identify some value. So, if you kind of focus in on picking races where you've got a big field that's probably competitive, and you have the kind of race that you're comfortable analyzing, that's probably where you want to focus most of your time. That's where you're more likely, when after you've done the work, to have identified some value. So that's a really good point that that's worth making. Now, and that's again kind of why playing win bets and maybe some of the simple vertical bets like wins and exactas are the way to go, because that way you can be real selective about the races you play, and you're not forced to play races in a sequence where you're playing horizontals that might have a small uncompetitive field, or there's not much chance to find value, and it might not be the kind, or it might not be the kind of race that you're very good at handicapping. That's one of the reasons why vertical plays may be a better way to go, especially depending on your level of skill, than horizontal plays. Because horizontal plays, unless you're very robust in your handicapping skills and you're sharp at all kinds of races, different surfaces, distances, class, it's really hard to have a good opinion in every race in a sequence. Whereas if you're playing, just a win or vertical plays, you can really cherry pick the races. So that's just something else to keep in mind in terms of trying to improve your long-term results.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right.
What do you think that the next race there's more horses in there? Maybe we can find some value.
You want to do the 10th? You want to look at that one?
Do the 10th.
All right. Let's do the 10th. This
is a classic, race 10 or finale race on a fairgrounds card, state bred. We're either sprinting or we're going this short turn mile. It's a huge field, and there's usually a lot of horses that are sort of familiar with each other, and there's some class droppers, right? And it's so we're going this 1 mile, this short stretch mile. Got that first finish line at fairgrounds. State breds claiming 5,000 with these conditions. I think it hasn't won 2 races since July 6th, or hasn't won 4 races. 4-year-olds and up, and it's it's made extra just challenging because a lot of these horses are exiting that December 16th race in the slop. That sort of had an interesting race flow to it, and was kind of an outlier on the day in terms of it was kind of an off the pace day, but that was it was really a forward flow race, and then. We've got, some AEs in here too. We've got a full 15 horse, 12, are going to run, but 15 could possibly pile up if anybody scratches. Now, so I've watched all these races back, watched them all back recently, and have a good sense of these horses. And these state bred horses, they can kind of cycle in and out of form and all that sort of stuff. And it's still hard for me to get away from this. Number 9 War Count. Shane Wilson has been just putting his horses in all the right spots, and they've been running well. He's the meet leading trainer right now. He's got a lot of things going for him. He's got the confidence of his owners, and he's putting them where they can win, and nobody's arguing with him. And War Count has basically the same setup as last year. December 17th, hadn't raced since August 20th, came in at a claiming 12,500 and, lost by, just a half a length to next out winner unanimously. I think that was a Chris Hartman horse. Like Mike was in there too. Tough field. Same setup, haven't seen this horse since September 4th. And, the figures that that he ran all last year should beat these, and no one really is going to go with him. I mean, there's no other forward front running and need the lead sort of type horses. Guerrero's great on the lead, the jockey is, and it's hard to go against Workout in here. But
so Workout's kind of on his own level in terms of likelihood of winning in the here.
Yep.
All right.
Beyond him, number 3, Wise Guy, I think is interesting. I don't know this trainer very well, Jean LeBlanc. Newly, second time coming out of his barn, but that 5,000 starter allowance last time, that was a much tougher race than this on December 8th. Fast break was Robert Falcone, steamer, who was kind of just in that spot to get the win, and was much the best. And that there was another steamed up horse that they dueled, and just that one folded, I think, after Fast Break beat him. Keys Included had a tough trip, but that's a tough horse who's run well, and Wise Guy's put some good figures out there. Tactically, just sort of, doesn't really have a true identity. I think that the break is going to be key, but draws in a good spot, assuming that a lot of the horses aren't coming down and making that first turn tough for Wise Guy. Deshaun Parker is up on this one again, and he tends to be a patient rider, tends to, if he's got the horse, be in the right spot. So Wise Guy, second start in the form cycle, has run the figures to get it done, but could just be up against it pace-wise. If there was more speed signed on, I'd be more interested in Wise Guy, but definitely in that second tier of horses that I think could win. Then we've got interesting one, Steal It Back, the number 6. Yeah, the 6, 7, and 12 I would put in that same. I'm sorry. Let's go to JB Gray, number 11. That's my next win horse in here. So JB Gray is a horse that ran a good figure there on I think a 12 on Thoroughgraph on November 30th, and overcame a tough draw and a carousel race flow. So that was a good one. It was basically the same race there on November 30th. Our Freddie Mac was a Shane Wilson horse, went to the lead and never looked back. Next race there for JB Gray, got sent early, and this is against much tougher field. You wouldn't know it, just looking back to class level. But When You Win, Crusader Express, Reckless Ransom, a bunch of horses with back form that were dropping in here and just sort of just trying to get the win. But got squeezed and by a horse coming down onto the rail, and had to be steadied and taken back, and really was kind of over at that point, but then ran well at the end and galloped out nicely. And I understand why we're going 2 turns here with JB Gray, 4-year-old who, could show us some more and could just sort of be dirtied up from those last 2 races. Third start, change in riders. Raquel Mace had some wins. Seems to have found some live mounts here and there. No wins for the trainer yet. Hard to love on the win end, but one that in terms of and this is something I do, Chris, where I find long shots that I think, all right, I want to be alive to this one, in a multi-race wager, right? I don't want to throw my money through JB Gray by any means, but I might have a couple tickets that do end, in JB Gray, because the value is going to be there in a major way, or should be, the way that I'm seeing it.
So he's a win contender?
This is one of the things. Is he a win contender, or is he's interesting if the price is right? And I guess it's back to what we were talking about before, not conflating what I think the value of the horses and with my
so just don't think about price at all. Is he a win? Is he as likely to win as Wise Guy?
He is less likely to win as Wise Guy. Less likely.
All right.
All right. Yeah, I could. This is one, in my handicapping in terms of a horse that could step forward. This one could step forward. I could, going long, we could see a better run, and also those were.
So tough. If he steps forward, do you think he's a win contender? It sounds like you do. Maybe not at the same level as Wise Guy, but he has a legitimate chance to win. It's not like, oh yeah, they all have a chance to win. This guy, you'd be consider making a win bet on him.
Yes.
If you had the right, everything's always if you had the right price, but this is one where they're, if you're putting your tiers of contenders, you've got War Count on top, you've got Wise Guy below, and then maybe a notch below, but still a win contender. You've got JB Gray. Is that fair to say?
Yep, it is.
All
and
right.
I've got a couple more at that same sort of level as JB Gray.
At the same level as JB Gray? Okay. And who are they?
Number 6, Steal It Back for Patricia West. Steadied twice in that last race, once early, once late, and got fanned out at the end. Sort of hurt it out and fanned out really wide on that. And it was a sloppy track and 0 for 6. Not even in the money on a sloppy track. Just doesn't seem to run well there. Race before bumped a foe out of the gate and just got outbid late. And it was a wire-to-wire winner. A lone speed horse was in that race on November 25th, and 50 was the only speed. Took him around. So I think Steal It Back could win, and is interesting in here. There's a lot of these horses have a good case to be made for them, and I'm in a catbird seat. This 10-year-old caught 5 to 6 wide throughout last time at the slop. Before bumped out her foe out of the gate. Near the back on the rails, game for second in that same race with Ann 50, and loves this distance, runs well at fairgrounds. Tanner Tracy's having a good meet at the trainer and gets a little bit of a weight allowance here. And Kylie Wellington's been riding pretty well for an apprentice. So I'm in a catbird seat, give a in that third tier of win possibility. And there's just to be a little bit more brief about it. I mean, number 2, Arctic Rose, and number 5, Gallant Star. So like these are horses that I feel like they are going to be overbet because that last race was a really good flow for them, and I just never trust. Or I try not to trust that the form is going to hold up at this sort of level, right? In terms of this 5,000 level state bred, and they make sense. I think they're going to make sense to a lot of bettors. And I know I'm talking value in here. It's underneath it all. But they've got a chance to win. A chance of winning. I guess you got to put them in that second tier. I'm just trying to get all my value out of my head. They'd be there with Wise Guy, Gallant Star, and Arctic Rose, the 2 and the 5 there.
All right. So hold on there because I want to make sure I've caught up to you. So right now we've got War Count kind of at the top tier. We've got Wise Guy, and you added in Arctic Rose and Gallant Star at that second tier. This is just likelihood of winning, not value. Right.
Yep.
And then you have a third tier of horses you think have a chance to win, but they're kind of that third tier that Steal It Back in whatever the catbird seat. I'm in the catbird seat. What a terrible name. JB Gray and Guitar Tuition Please.
Yeah,
those are all at that next level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other horses we haven't hit on, and those are all. This is kind of a wide open race. You give those horses a chance to win, not as much, but you wouldn't be shocked if they won, and you'd be even consider playing them at the right price. So, those are like legit win contenders, even though they're sort of in the third tier. So what else do you have in here?
I think
the one horse.
That's enough. Yeah, I guess I would say I would throw the 1 in there. We just saw DeCoin put this one against allowance ranks for time and again. He was seeing something. And then when he did finally decide to drop, we were caught, wide the whole time and against the forward race flow, and we didn't see much. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that horse run well. But the more I think about that horse, the more I'm just underneath. I think that horse
underneath. Okay, so that's a notch below that third tier of contenders. This is like an underneath only. Okay. Oh, what about the 4 horse Bayou Sarge?
Yeah, Bayou Sarge. I'd say that both of those Yeah, the gelding aspect, I'm like, all right, there's a reason for possibly improvement. I think Castillo got a win for Broussard here today, early on the card while we've been talking, so that could be sort of an interesting little theme going on there. Yeah, I mean, Bayou Sarge, I would put that same as the one, and that third spot could run third, could run underneath, and could run third.
All right, and what about the 8-horse Zong Tough?
Zong Tough.
Got a toss?
Yeah, ran
what about
7 on Thoroughgraph and that race on June 12th, but it was just a perfect setup, small field, just we're never going to see that again. So I'm tossing that guy. I don't think he.
All right, and what about the 10?
And the 10, you do 19. No, nothing. Toss.
All right. Okay, so I think we caught them all. So bottom line there is we've got, this is a big field, and that's typically where you might find some value. It looks like, you had kind of War Count, the most likely winner, sort of on his own tier. And interestingly, he is the favorite, but from a morning line standpoint, 7-2 is a pretty high price. So you got him at the top, and then you've got the 2 Arctic Rose, 3 Wise Guy, and 5 Gallant Star, all at that next level of win contention. They're not at the same level as War Count, but a notch below. And then you've got a group of horses that you think are all at the next level. They have a chance to win enough to where you could consider them for win bets, and that's the 6 Ill at Back, the 7 I'm in the Catbird Seat, the 11 JB Gray, and the 12 Guitar Tuition Please. So those, and then you've got a couple, 1 Saurus and 4 Bayou Sarge that are kind of underneath only, and a couple tosses with 8 Zong Tong and 10 Juju 19. And so, it's kind of a slog to go through all the horses, but in a big field is important, because where you might be surprised is, even those horses without a chance to win are still have some chance, and they're reducing the chance of the horses that you think are contenders. So a lot of times people will under or overestimate the likelihood of the horse they like in a big field. Especially you see this the most in like the Kentucky Derby with 20 horses. People just have no feel for what, to play in a 20-horse field. And they might think, wow, I'm getting 8-1 on this horse. That's great value. Well, in a normal like 8-horse field, that might be great value, but in a 20-horse field, 8-1, unless you really, think the horse is much better than most of the others, then it's probably not as good a price as you think. So that's where making the fair odds line forces you to evaluate all the horses, and you can see that reflected in the odds line. So I'm going to create the fair odds line now and send it to you so we can talk about it. So give me a minute to do that, and then we'll talk about what does this tell us in terms of how we want to play this race. Okay?
Yeah, I'm going to be. So I'm really interested, because like I was.
Let me do that real quickly.
So many horses who are pique my interest, but yeah, that 9 does seem pretty dangerous in here.
Yeah, and so we'll talk about that, because maybe this is a race where you can focus on maybe some vertical plays, keying the 9 on top with some of your prices. So we'll see what the odds line tells us. So now you have the odds line in front of you. I sent it to you so we can take a look at it. This one's a little more interesting. It based on the way I captured your opinion, it identifies 5 different horses where there's a slight. Well, at least no. Let's see. Take that back. There's 3 horses really. I kind of color coded this incorrectly, so ignore the way I colored that. What I sent you, but really there's 3 horses in here that kind of offer some value, and your most likely winner, War Count, is kind of fair value. It says the fair odds are 7-2, and the morning line odds are 7-2. So it kind of it's saying that it's that you're basically the fair odds match morning line. Do you think that morning line's going to hold up on that horse? You think it's going to be 7-2, or do you think it's kind of obvious and the crowd's going to bet that horse down below that?
They bet him. They bet the favorites hard at Fairgrounds. I mean, like that race I was talking about that sort of popped up earlier, that was a similar sort of deal with like a front runner, Shane Wilson horse. I think he at the end got that down to 3-5. It's like at 6-5. At post time, and then boom, 3-5. So yeah, speed and I think it'll be below.
So we're not thinking we're going to get the morning line on this horse. Is what you're telling me. You'd be really surprised. So
I'd be surprised.
So there's not going to be any value with him. Yeah. And I kind of agree with you. To me, that horse sort of looks kind of obvious. I mean, the only question with him is, it's been a while since he's run.
Yeah.
But the trainer does pretty well off the layoff, and it looks like he's controlling speed. There's a whole bunch of about him. You already talked about it. So let's assume there's not going to be any value there. So what it's telling you outside that is there's like 3 horses that you identified kind of in that tier 3 of contenders, where you thought these horses, they're not nearly as likely to win as War Count, but they're likely enough to consider. And that was the 6 Steal It Back, who at 15-1 morning line, the fair odds are just a little about the same. I'm in the catbird seat again. Fair odds morning line about the same, slightly less. But JB Gray is the one horse where it has the fair odds of 14-1 and morning line of 20-1. So that's the one horse. But of those 3 horses, if we think the favorite's going to get bet well below that 7-2. Is there a chance any of those 3, 6, 7, or 11 kind of get overlooked, and they're 20+1 at post time? Between the 6, 7, and 11.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of Steal It Back, Patricia West, they don't bet her horses very hard, and JB Gray. I think it's a pretty. I think I don't think that it'll be an obvious, horse without watching the races back. So I think that's going to offer some potential value. So
this would be a race then where you'd watch the odds board, and with the 6, 7, 11, you might, and again, the amount you bet would not be like a prime bet, because we already acknowledged these horses are kind of a tier 3 contender, right? Their likelihood of winning is probably more in the 10% chance to win kind of range, plus or minus a few percent. So they're not high likelihood winners, but there could be some value if they float up to 20-1 plus, and you might make a little bet on one of those to win. And if you get a couple of those at a big price, they might even be something you could like box in an exacta or something. It's a low strike rate kind of play, but if you get the big price, this is a chance maybe to hit a big exacta or a big win price. Now, if we didn't think War Count was going to get pounded, then you might even be able to use them in exactas underneath War Count. But if you think War Count's going to get bet way down, to even money or something, even though they're long shots, there's probably not a lot of value there. But that's one other thing you could consider. If War Count doesn't get hammered, or even if he does, and you see, you might get some really big prices with him on top of either the 6, 7, or 11. That would be a way you could look at, even in the try, with him on top of those horses. That's where you can figure at least you're going to get some value underneath, assuming that they do get overlooked like we think they might. Now, if we look at the will pays and Steal It Back's 8-1, then we're not going to play that. But if we look at the will pays and Steal It Back's 25-1, based on the doubles, all of a sudden that horse might be something we can put a little win money on. And if one of the others, 7 or 12, 11, are in the same kind of position, maybe we can even play some exactas, and then we can look at what you're getting in terms of value underneath war count, even depending on how they play him. So that's kind of how you could use the value line even on those vertical plays. The other thing is you could look at, we talked about that prior race where you like, the 5. If you got, maybe you get like your fair odds line is 2-1, and maybe the horse is going off at 5-2. So maybe you don't want to make a win bet, but you could look at the doubles into the 10th race and maybe hook that one up with the 6, 7, or 11, depending on what they're, what those are paying. That might be a nice kind of long shot double play you can make with 1 or 2 or all 3, depending on how the race gets bet. That's a way you might be able to leverage a little bit of value on the 5 and a little bit of value in the 10th on those long shots into a pretty good play. Again, it's not one you'd make a huge bet on, but it's one where you some kind of investment and maybe anticipate some long-term value there. So I don't know how you would normally approach it.
Yeah, I like that. I do the double a lot. I think that's a great way to work with, trying to. I think we were talking with Paul Matisse about finding multipliers, right? Multiplying value, right? If I really do love Gray, how can I can find opinions nearby to really make that into a valuable play if it's not offering it, there in the win pools. And yeah, I think those are the ones that it's interesting to see it sort of come back this way and see, Arctic Rose and Gallant Star and Wise Guy also, and Guitar Tuition Please, according next to the fair odds, they look like they're going to be serious underlays, which I think those are the obvious ones that bettors will go towards outside of a war count. So it's a good betting race.
And that's a good point.
You can peel out what the alternatives are, and if I not liking the alternatives, sort of makes it a bettable race for me.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You thought Arctic Rose and Bayou Sarge weren't good value, but you still had to admit they probably had as good a chance to win as Wise Guy. So you have to rate them that way, but you can still see that your fair odds line tells you that they're not good value, right? You don't want to just make that assumption and not, and underestimate their actual chances of winning. Just let the fair odds line point to you to where the value is. And it worked. In this case, in your mind, you thought Arctic Rose was an underlay. And in fact, based on your the fair odds line, he is an underlay, right? Even though you made him a win contender, he's still an underlay, right?
Yeah.
So that's
got an interesting one because I'm maybe they'll sleep on Wise Guy. Maybe that one won't come through. But really, I think maybe I'm just kind of fooling myself. They'll probably bet that one as well. So it's interesting how I can kind of get behind one underlay when I'm cooking value into my handicapping, but not another. And maybe that's I like that. This is helpful to sort of just make it black and white as opposed to conflated when I'm handicapping and thinking through. There's value in being against those second, third, fourth choices. So this could be just a big, key war count on top. And assuming this is sort of what we're looking at with the odds, I could just
catching a price under
all these underneath,
a big price underneath, right? You because your opinion is these potentially big prices have a legit chance to win, not as much a chance as the other contenders, but legit enough to make a play like that, and if not win, at least run second, and beat those other horses besides War Count, who you kind of have on his own tier. So, that's kind of where it's at. And don't forget that, Arctic Rose, Wise Guy, and Gallant Star, their fair odds are, 6.5 to 1. It's pretty high. But if they pound War Count, say down to 4 to 5, one of those three might go off at double-digit odds and be a play.
Right.
Maybe Arctic Rose turns out to be a play, or Wise Guy, or Gallant Star. So, you still have that possibility. Now, I don't know if you anticipate that, but at least you've got that odds line, and you can look at the double wheel pays and see what the estimated off odds are, and see if there's a surprise in there where one of those does get overlooked. again, that's the value of having an odds line for every horse. And if you trust your odds line, then you might find a bet with a horse that you were thinking you wanted to fade, like Arctic Rose. Maybe you'll be surprised, and then everybody jumps on War Count, and Arctic Rose floats up well above the morning line. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if it does, you're ready to pounce if that's the case. And the other thing I'll point out is just you will find cases where you've got like these high probability, most likely winners that just aren't good win bets. And, War Count, if he's anything close to his morning line, he probably won't be, both of us are real surprised if he's above it. But if he doesn't get hammered, say he's 3-1 or 5-2, he's no value in the win pool, but you might be able to get, him on top of some of those long shots in the exacta. And then if we go back to the prior race, that 5 au revoir, who, the fair odds are 2-1, you're thinking probably going to go off at about that price. Not a lot of value to win, but that's a really good example of a horse where now, if you had something underneath in that race that you could play, you could hook up with, and maybe at post time, the odds will point out somebody else in there that you could play an exacta underneath him. But we do know for sure that, or we're pretty confident that there's going to be some long shots that are live in that next race that you could play doubles to au revoir to. So that kind of leverage a slight, if he's just a slight overlay, now you can multiply that with a long shot in the next leg, and it's value multiplied by value. That's where you can make a score. So that looking at your opinion and kind of how it shakes out, if we're right, the War Count's going to get bet significantly below his price, and those long shots in that race might float up to 20-1 plus. And we're right that au revoir is probably going to get bet down a little bit below the morning line, but probably be pretty close to fair odds. That's probably the play, is hooking that one up with some of those live long shots in the next leg in the doubles. That's probably the best value play you've got in this sequence based on, the way you've doped it out.
Yeah. And I think, one thing I'm always trying to do as well is to think in terms of, my handicapping opinions, but also sort of how they work together in terms of, building out pick fives, building out multi-race wagers. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a race where I would want to go against War Count, but identifying these horses that will, that could, offer value in one of the legs can be really helpful, right? In terms of building tickets, in terms of seeing where you're going to get equity and having that built in. And this is interesting because it makes me think like, all right, yeah, why waste my money on these second, third choices, Arctic Rose, Gallant Star, Wise Guy, when if people get off of, War Count, they go deeper than that, they're probably going to go to those horses, right? And possibly even getting away from Guitar Tuition Please and Bayou Sarge too. There's not too much meat on that bone too, right? So, but JB Gray, that sort of horse might be the type of one where you're like, all right, I don't want to go deep and, do $100 ticket that tries to beat War Count, but it might be worth it to do something skinny, an $8 ticket that just singles JB Gray in that last leg, and just to sort of be open to that huge, value proposition of beating all those horses in this last leg. It could be good. And it looks, then the carryover is happening. It looks like it's only about $30,000, but they missed in the early pick five today. So there'll be some money waiting for us tomorrow when we come to that late pick five.
And with the pick five, that's a whole nother discussion, and it depends on all the other legs. But just looking at this, based on your opinion, I could see you singling the 5 au revoir in the 9th and singling the 9 War Count in the 10th. And if you did that and your prime ticket, and then maybe you could have a second ticket where you try to beat War Count with 1 or 2 of these long shots, maybe in all 3. And where if you're right on the other legs, you got a chance for, the big price in this last leg. But that would be a small play most your money, your main ticket would be with war count on top and of law on top. And, right there, if you're singling two horses, that's pretty powerful. And your pick five with a little small backup with some real long shots. That's not a bad starting point for the pick five. We haven't talked about the other three races, and given that we're kind of 2 hours in, I think this might be about all we try to cover today. I think we kind of hit the main points, but as we look at the other races, and everyone can go out and look at, we can tweet out the link, Kevin, to your playbook when you put it out there. Then take a look at your opinion on the other races. But having two singles in a sequence is really the math is really works in your favor, because if you can find, and you're not getting a lot of value in those two, but you're not losing a lot either. At least with Au revoir, we don't feel like we're losing a lot. And if people pay attention to the morning line like they often do in horizontals, even war count may not be that bad of a, you might not be losing a lot of equity, especially when you're singling it. You're really not losing equity when you single. You're just not necessarily gaining it. But you're really cutting down your combinations with those two singles without giving up, without, zeroing in on a 2 to 5 shot. And so that opens things up where if you can find some value in those earlier legs, you might have, especially with a carryover, something worth playing in terms of the pick five. And there's a low takeout at Fairgrounds. Their pick fives, I think 15%, if my memory serves me right. And it's no, there's no consolation. So it's about as good a pick five as there is in terms of, there's a few lower prices, but 15% is a good price relative to most tracks, especially without a consolation. And with a carryover on top of that, probably a sequence that's definitely worth taking a look at, and especially if you've got opinions sort of like yours, where you've got a couple horses you can lean on in the later legs, and maybe a couple of live long shots to throw into a backup ticket. When I say backup ticket, it's not being defensive; it's really being aggressive here. You respect war count, but there is that chance where you got a couple of long shots that could blow it up. And rather than throwing them in caveman style and multiplying your ticket by 3, if you're smart and play a separate ticket with those horses and maybe your strongest opinions in the other legs, you can get them onto your ticket for a lot lower price. That's why, playing multiple tickets versus going to a caveman is so much better, especially when you got potential single or strong lean like war count or au revoir. If you throw in another horse in a caveman ticket, you're doubling the cost. And typically you don't want to double the cost unless if you include a favorite. If you're including somebody with the favorite and you're doubling your cost, that's probably not a good ticket. So, if there's an example of like in this 10th race where you think war count's kind of solid, but you got a couple live long shots that just might surprise. You play that main ticket with war count keyed, and then you play a small aggressive ticket with your long shots. And so it's not defensive. Defensive would be like playing it with Arctic Rose and Wise Guy, and Gallant Star. Those horses are the second, third, they're as in the A, B, C, D, they're B, C, and D. Playing B, C, and D with A on a caveman ticket is terrible. But even playing the super long shots on a caveman ticket, when they have a significantly lower chance than war count, probably isn't the way to go. But if you create a second ticket with just those on it and just your strongest opinions in the other legs, a small ticket, then you got a shot at that big price. If you're really right on the prior legs, you got a shot at a monster score in the last leg. If you're not perfect in the other legs, but you're pretty good, then you still could be live to war count in that last leg, assuming, of course, you've got some value in those earlier legs. If every leg looks like these first two, or you're kind of leaning on the favorite in every one, then you probably need to pass the sequence. But if there's one or two legs where you can fade the favorite and get some value, then all of a sudden it becomes very interesting, especially with the carryover.
Yeah, it's one of those sequences where I've got chalk on top, and And the other two stakes as well with Braun and Brow in the first leg. Just a really, really strong horse in there, and overcharged in that race 8. And so it's one that people are going to be leaning very heavily on those well-known commodities of Braun and Brow, overcharged, and Ubre is a little bit less as much. So if you do have a different opinion, you can, it might be worth it to build a bigger ticket if you do think those horses are vulnerable, because there'll be a lot of money on that on those sides of the coin for sure. But yeah, with that carryover money, it could be an interesting sequence to play. Maybe in that 7th race, we got that nice maiden turf sprint. Does seem like there's some interesting ones. Foley's got a interesting horse, number 11, Wonder of You, second time out, seems to have some speed, and speed's been holding pretty well. So there could be some spots where you can still get some value and lean on those favorites in those other legs.
It does look like it could be. It does look like it'd be a chalky sequence.
Yeah,
so
it does.
With the carryover, you still, if you think the chalk is strong in every leg, and there's some value just because you've got of the carryover, all of a sudden it might even be a positive. I don't know how much money will get bet in. Maybe it'll get swamped by the new money, but at least you're going to have a reduced takeout. If you're still thinking it's going to chalk out, just make sure you don't start including favorites with other horses. And think about multiple tickets. Maybe you play one ticket where it's chalk, but then play some tickets where you've got chalk with at least, 1 or 2 legs where you've got a price. And like you said, that, that maiden race is one place you may get the price. The problem is that's kind of the obvious leg where everyone's going to be looking for a price. So
yeah, the maiden and
ideally it would be nice if there's one of those favorites besides that turf race where you can fade them. Whether it's Braun and Brow, or let's see who's the favorite, or Overcharged, or Ovois, or War Count. If it's you probably want to fade one of those, and then maybe look for a price in that spread leg too. But in order to make it really worth the play, or you could just make, like I think you were saying something like this before. Maybe you're playing chalk and just trying to fade. The one race where you're going to try to fade is fade War Count and try to catch one of your prices. Just play a small ticket. That's if you think all the chalk is strong. You don't have to make a big play. Maybe just take a shot, and if you get lucky and can beat War Count and catch a price in that race, and it chalks out otherwise, you make a nice score. There's a lot of ways you can go. There's no right or wrong. Although I guess there are some, some of the wrong things are, play A, B, C, D, in every race is not a good thing. So, you can't be playing the favorite and the second favorite and the third favorite and the fourth favorite in a leg. That's just bad. That's bad ticket construction. If you like the favorite, you kind of almost have to single it to be efficient in those multi-race wagers.
Yeah, I agree.
Or at least lean on it heavily, right? If you're playing multiple tickets, lean on it heavily. And if you're gonna play anything else other than the favorite, it should be like the example we gave, where you're looking for prices in that second ticket, not the second and third choices.
I think that's not knowing where your valuable opinion is, right? Where that equity is, right? Even if you do like that favorite in there and you use that one, if you're adding extra into that leg, why? Is it because you've got value in this 8-1 horse in the last leg that you just want to be able to catch that value no matter what, because you're pretty sure about that one is going to come home for you, or something like that. But yeah, knowing where that valuable opinion is very key.
Yeah, and using all the pools available, the ones that where your opinion, you can leverage your opinion best. In this case, it's probably going to be the double pool between in those last two races where au revoir, you maybe can play au revoir in doubles with a couple of those longer priced horses that you think, have a shot at winning. That might be the best play, regardless of what else you do on the card, right? Make sure you do that, and maybe you can hit. Then even if you don't use them in the pick five, or you don't hit the pick five, you're dead. You're not live to those in your pick five. Even if you play a ticket with them, you still have a chance to hit the double, right? Or
Right.
so that's what you want to use, all the pools, but you only want to make the bets that have value, or there's some value, and if you can leverage value, multiple chances at value, like within an exacta or trifecta or a double or a pick three, great. Multiply that value is great. So you're only betting where you've got an edge, and you're only betting in a way that's consistent with your opinion of the race. If you don't want to be, if you think a favorite's vulnerable, you don't want to be using it defensively and boxing it on top in exactas and throwing it into your picks. And if you think a horse is only an underneath use, it's very unlikely to win. The value is underneath, and that's how you use it. You're not boxing it on top. You got to make sure that your bets match your opinion. That's really important. So you do that, look for value, make sure your bets match your opinion, use a systematic approach to evaluating every race so that you can establish a baseline and evaluate your performance over time and make changes to improve. And then, use a fair odds line as that tool that translates your opinions on the race into a tool to help you identify, value and make good bets. Now, that's kind of what I was hoping the listeners will get out of this. And then maybe I'll also throw in, think wisely about race selection so that you don't waste a lot of time on races that are unlikely to make a profit betting, either, by focusing on the kind of races where your opinion is the sharpest, and also, on those larger fields, more competitive races where you're more likely to be able to, the public might make a mistake that you can capitalize on. So if you do all that, I think you can improve your results. And if you're already doing all that, great. Hopefully you've been successful. If you're doing most of that, great. Maybe there's a few things you can try out that might help improve your results. And if you hate math, then the fair odds line just makes you gag just to think about trying to make one of those. Like I said, I'll throw this out as the teaser. I am working with some others to maybe create something that will do that for you and help you translate your handicapping opinion into a fair odds line in a painless way that doesn't require any math. So anything else you want to add before we sign off, Kevin?
Just that, this is really, it's really helpful to think through. And I'm going to be betting these races with, with this initial fair odds line. But I know you also mentioned, adding with the daily double information into it all, and it's gonna be cool. I haven't done it like this, so I can't wait to take a swing with it. And the systematic aspect of it all, I think, is just really a big key to unlocking it, and the one that I'm still working on. Just knowing that this isn't the only opportunity. It's about over time playing the opportunity. Whether it's this long shot or whether it's this sequence that I like, in the same way, and trust that my handicapping opinion and recognition of value is sharp enough, and my edge is there, that it will come through into profits, over a year, and not just get caught up into, I've got to cash this one right now. And if I don't, I'll be mad at myself and I'll kick myself, because I think that's what gets in my head sometimes and makes me, like we were talking about, use long shots defensively, like, I would hate if this horse won, even though I don't think it's a likely winner. So yeah, I think that systematic aspect of it, Chris, is just is so key.
Yeah, and I will I'll tweet out, obviously a link to the pod, and I'll tweet out the fair odds lines that we came up with in these two races, the 9th and 10th. So the listeners can see that. I know if you're just listening, it's hard to see the numbers in front of you. And then I will also tomorrow update that with replace the morning line with the estimated odds based on the will pays. Once the prior race is over, once the 8th is over, I can do it for the 9th. And once the 9th is over, I can do it for the 10th. And I'll tweet that out so we can see, oh, well, looks like, you know what, war count is going to be a good bet. Or, you know what, they're pounding war count, but guess what? Wise guys 10-1 on the, the double will pays. Or, we're getting 30-1 on JB Gray or Steal It Back. So we'll see that. Now, it doesn't mean the will pays are perfect predictors of the off odds, but they're an improvement over what we've got talking about a day in advance. And I think they're good enough to make, with a fair odds line to make pretty good betting decisions. It doesn't mean you're not ever going to get surprised, but the number of surprises should go way down if you've been using the morning line or the win pool tote board. Using those will pays is a much better way to do it. And again, if you don't like to do the math, there are some places you can get to that, including DRF Formulator, and some of the tracks were actually shown in their live feed. I know Indiana Downs did it. I think there might have been another track that's done that, but hopefully all the tracks will start doing that. You won't have to do that. But if not, I didn't want to spend time on how you create a fair odds line. It's really not that hard, but I know some people just hate any kind of math, so we're not going to talk about that here. And hopefully, the not too distant future, you'll have ways to get that information without having to do the math yourself. So with that, I think we're going to call it a day. I think we're a couple hours into this. I didn't know how long it would take to get through a race. I was hoping maybe we do a few more, but I think this wasn't about trying to tell you what to bet on these two races. It was more to give you examples about how you can think a little differently about how you play the game and approach, being a horse player, and start really having a systematic, reliable way of identifying value and translating your handicapping opinion into good bets. So with that, I want to thank my guest, Kevin Kilroy. Thank you, Kevin. Good luck tomorrow. Good luck on the meeting at Fairgrounds. And I want to thank all the listeners. Appreciate your support and your interest. And may you all boldly go where no horse player has gone before.